Thank you very much, all. So welcome again to the Project Management Network Conference. This is the second of our 2022 series. So my name is Kevin Dowling. I'm the Principal Officer in the Department of Defence and Head of ICT. I'm currently engaged with assisting the promotion of project and programme management disciplines in the public service as part of the department's sponsorship of OPS 2020 Action 10. In addition to being the head of the ICT, I have other project management, directorship, leadership and sponsorship roles in the organisation and at interdepartmental committee levels. Today's webinar is, believe it or not, is our 11th since we pivoted to the online forum aspects in May 2022. In May 2020. Our March 2022 conference was well attended, and we focused there on project management, software and learning and development components. And I would like to thank Paula Flanagan from OGCIO, Siobhan Gaffey from One Learning, and Dave Healy for their engagements at the time. Both Paul and Dave have moved on to other roles, and I wish them the best in the knowledge that they'll continue to champion and promote best practice project management in their new organisations. I would also like to thank Nolene McHugh from LGMA, who significantly made contributions to the work of the team, and I wish her well in project management, her retirement. So delighted to welcome you all, as I said, to today's conference, which is focusing on managing projects with data and into the whole new exciting world of AI. I'm joined by three presenters today who will provide insights based on their current experience and perhaps even give us some pointers to the future. Eileen Murphy from the Centre of Statistics Office is going to provide us with an overview of project management of census administration. Eileen was responsible for the census administration for Census 2022. I'm sure that was challenging, Eileen, and we'll hear a little bit more about that later. So she was involved in the procurement, recruitment, payments, publicity, general project management, budgets. I think there's a fair amount within that portfolio. And she's been recently appointed the head of digital first transformation for Census 2027. So I'm sure she's going to rely on significant levels of lessons learned from her 2022 experience as a drive into 2027. We're also joined today by Ciarán, Hickey and Tim Morthorst from EY, who are going to provide some value in the area of current and future trends, particularly focusing on the artificial intelligence age in which we live. Ciarán is the Director of Data Analytics Practice, where he leads the data science and AI capability. He's also a part-time lecturer in AI and machine learning for the Analytics Institute of Ireland, previous winner of the Analytics Practitioner of the Year Award in 2022. And Tim is a senior manager in the technology consulting practice. He's a qualified engineer and has worked in the development of robotics and AI in the public sector organizations across the world. So, as I said, we've an exciting lineup this morning. I'm going to kick off first of all with a poll. Given that we're kind of in sort of the world of big data, and we're seeing significant leanings towards concentration on data right across the public service. It's embedded in the public service strategies and civil service reforms. So we're going to just kick off with a poll. So I would like to see if we could share a poll at the moment. So the poll is just a simple one, really. Do projects in your organization involve significant volumes of data? And I appreciate that there's a number of different public service bodies tuned in today. Some of you may not necessarily have too much exposure to data or AI, but I think if you haven't to date, you will in the future anyway. So I suppose we really just wanted to get a sense today as to what types of of data banks that you might have had exposure to. So we'll let that poll run for another couple of minutes, and we might just kick off with some general housekeeping rules. I've asked the presenters to maybe talk for 15 to 20 minutes, so we'd like to leave some time for discussion and questions and answers after the presentations. And I'd like to thank Eileen, Tim and Ciarán for their time. They're going to stay on till the end. So we will look at the various questions that might come in through our questions mechanism throughout the course of the event, and we might get a chance to put them to the panelists at the tail end of our sessions. So within WebEx, you have an opportunity to launch your Q&A. It's typically the three buttons at the bottom of your screen where you would enable that Q&A function. So we'd like a couple of questions to be posed where we can talk to our panelists at the tail end of the session. So on that basis, I'm going to kick off and invite Eileen to provide an outline of her general approach and lessons learned, and some insights into the work that was involved in a programme of such significance as the census. She might also share some updates and initiatives underway in terms of her piece on digital transformation and innovation with regards to the census, which I think will be of interest to us all. So I'm going to invite Eileen now to come in and present her screens and talk through her presentation. Thank you.
Thanks. Learned in Census 2022. A lot of people think the census just happens, for the few weeks that it's live in the public, but it's a 5-year project that takes a lot of planning. So we generally do our census here every 5 years. Some other countries do it every 10 years. And it's probably the biggest logistical survey in the state, because we have to reach everybody in the country on census night, including visitors. So we're trying to get to 2 million homes of approximately 5 million people on one night. So in Ireland, we do a traditional census up till now, where the enumerators hand deliver and collect the forms from every house in the country. So we call that our live census field operation, and it takes place over 10 weeks. So 5 weeks before census night, we deliver all the census forms, and for 5 weeks after census night, we collect all the census forms. And as you can imagine, it's a huge project with its separate project board within the Central Statistics Office. So we do all the normal project management stuff, project concept documents, PIDs, risk registers, milestones. We actually have 12 sub-areas within the census, so a number of those areas that you mentioned that I'm responsible for, along with geography and logistics and dissemination and processing, etc. So each of those has their own project plan, their own business owner, and they all feed into the overall project plan. And then we have a project board who's with sole responsibility for the census, combined of internal census staff and the wider office of finance, HR, etc., and governance stat office, and external census expertise. We also had a seconded expert from the Office of Government Procurement that helped us with all the procurements. So as you see on the slide, we did have to postpone by a year, and we were able to renegotiate and extend those contracts on postponement because we had provided for it in our original contracts and our original tenders. Obviously, we had to go and seek budget approval as well. That was part of the decision to postpone, was that we would have the budget to do the extra year. And we obviously then had to redesign everything. So our recruitment process was a face-to-face process, interviewing people, bringing in their documents, taking their photographs, and we had to redesign all those elements, virtually all the training that takes place with these temporary staff. And I suppose the important thing to remember is you only have one go at a census. The night is set years in advance, and you know, with IT projects, the dates are very easy to slip, but there's no slippage. We've a very fixed date when we start the project, and everything has to be ready for that. And currently now we have all the forms back, and there's a huge staff here in Swords, nearly 200 people processing those forms. So they're individually checking each form to make sure the data on it makes sense and can be cleaned and analysed. So that's a huge part of our census work that the public doesn't see. So the census starts with a public consultation, and that took place in 2017. As I say, we had almost 400 submissions received as to questions that people would like to see on the census form in 21-22. So we convene what we call a census advisory group with experts from across the public service and experts in the key areas for particular questions that are on the form. And they sift through all those submissions to see what ones might be suitable for a census, because not every question is suitable for a census. Also, we have a lot of questions that are set by the EU, so there's only a certain space on the form where we can actually have new questions. And obviously considering response burden, you know, the longer the questionnaire is, will people fill it in for you? So finding that optimum space. So we tested 2 forms and sets of questions in a pilot in 2018. And the outcome was we agreed 8 new questions, 25 revised questions, and 11 unchanged questions. And obviously you can't build your system as to what's required, and you can't do your printing of the forms until all that has been finalised. So one of the key areas then for us is the designation of the country. So we create what we call enumeration areas. In 2016, we had 4,660 odd enumeration areas. And because of population and housing increase by 2022, there were 5,100 enumeration areas. So we use then the geodirectory, the National Address Database, as kind of the spine of this designation, obviously using our learnings on the address lists we have from 2016 and what the enumerators found when they went out in the field. And as well as that address list, then those enumeration areas are designated urban areas, rural areas, and mixed areas. And that address list becomes the spine for everything we do. So when we start recruitment, we know when we're recruiting that we're assigning people to particular areas. The managers, we're assigning them a certain number of enumeration areas to manage. If we're paying people, that's attached to that enumeration area. So everything we do, logistics, we have to get them the crates of all their equipment and what they'll need out in the field. And again, that's all driven through that enumeration area list. And our geography area then have to produce those address lists and maps for every enumerator so they know exactly where they're going. And we also, obviously we have to prepare this in advance. So we're talking to the Department of Housing and construction companies, etc., to know what might be built between the date we have to produce that register and census night to ensure that we have new builds and things included, so it's as up to date as possible. So the recruitment for the census starts about a year beforehand. So in HQ here in Swords, we have about 50 to 60 people in between census, which rises up to nearly 200 when we're processing, as we are now. But we also have to have a field staff to manage that field operation. And our recruitment starts about a year before census night with our senior managers. So we have 6 census liaison officers and 46 regional officers. And that competition runs about a year before census night. Then they help us to recruit the 466 field supervisors who will work from their own homes. Now, our regional officers did actually end up doing a lot of work from home this time, although we did have offices for them, but the way things panned out with COVID, we weren't sure which way we would be going. And then again, though, they all help us to recruit the 5,100 enumerators, because there's no way that 50 or 60 people in census could do that. So it's a huge operation, and just to give you some idea of some of the numbers involved in that, we had almost 16,000 applications for jobs with the census. With shortlisting and stuff, we ran almost 14,000 interviews, which involved 260 interview boards and almost 10,000 successful candidates. And we had built a whole system for this recruitment process. But again, as I said, it was a face-to-face system, and we had to go back to basics and redesign the whole system when COVID happened, because we knew we couldn't rely on being able to be in the same rooms with people. So from the time that they put in their job application to uploading documents for Garda vetting, to giving us their photo for their ID badges, to signing all the forms and documents that we all sign when we join up to the public service, to giving them their contract. All that moved online and became a virtual process that was virtually paperless, and again removed the need for lots of other forms and things. And even so, it was a difficult process, and even with those numbers, we still had difficulty having our field staff all over the time of the operation. So we were down, we had some vacant enumeration areas, although we employed over 5,400 enumerators, at any one time we could be sort of 200 enumerators down during the live field operation. So we mitigated that by splitting areas, getting people to take on second areas or half an area, etc. But there was still a few areas where we had issues, and we ended up having to post out forms, and in some small number of areas courier out forms to make sure that everybody in the country had their census form for census night. And of course now we have all our data retention policies in place, and we're now going through all that information to see what should be retained and for what periods and what needs to go. So we're trawling through all that at the moment. So as you can imagine, there's a volume of that generated from that process. And so we also used new field technology in the field. So in 2016, each enumerator got what we called enumerator a record book. So it was a book of addresses. So each enumeration area is approximately 400 households, maybe a little bit more in an easy area, maybe a little bit less in a difficult to enumerate area. And obviously between 2016 and 2022, GDPR came in. So we were really conscious of this, and we got approval to go to use an electronic case management system. But again, for us, the big decision internally was the use of the cloud, because with the amount of data and what was required to do that, we couldn't have done it if we had to build a static system. So that was the kind of game changer for us. So we tendered for that case management system. So each enumeration got a smartphone which had held their 400 addresses and was able to use the geography then to map them and direct them to where they needed to go. And then internally, we built what we called the field management system, which became the single voice of truth. So all the information that came from all the different systems was fed into the FMS. So the recruitment system fed into it, the field operation census case management system fed into it, our help desk fed into it, etc., etc. Payment system fed into it. So that was our single point of truth that kept the up-to-date data. And for this gave us a huge amount of real-time information from the field. So in previous censuses, until we got all the enumerator books and all the forms back at the end of the census, we didn't really know what was going on out in the field. Whereas now we had day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute information on how many forms were delivered, collected in what areas and what parts of the country, etc. And again, it reduced the paper required, and we were able to put in new processes, and we got improved information because of routing and making it mandatory for certain things to be filled in. We could do that on the phone, whereas it was kind of more optional out in the field before with the book. So we used smartphones, and each phone was associated with the geography related to that position. So again, we were able to automatically identify which enumerators were responsible for any given address, who their supervisors were, reporting structures, and again, as I was saying, how many forms were delivered or collected at any particular point in time. For the payments, we had worked with the National Shared Services Office to pay the enumerators. So it's the managers are fine, they're the standard way that we all get paid. The enumerators get paid on a piecemeal basis for every form delivered and collected, along with a certain number of allowances. So it was a very specific pay model. They get paid an advance for 9 weeks to just give them kind of expenses to make sure they could do the work during the 9 weeks. Then they come off payroll while we collate all those numbers of how many forms were paid and delivered and who did extra work, etc., and what allowances they're due, and then get put back on for what we called a week 10 payment. So it was quite a complicated system, and to do that, normally for the NSSO, people are input through their MIR system, which brings them into the HR section, and then that instructs the payroll what to do. But for the enumerators, we built a file upload system where we literally gave them a file upload up to 5,100 people and their relevant details of what to pay them at a particular point in time. And of course, that was all linked to travel and subsistence as well. So you can imagine with that number of people that there were huge numbers of claims as well going through. And obviously we had to liaise with revenue regarding pensions and revenue details as well. So that in itself was a huge project, and again, a huge volume of data. And now we're having to do the aftermath of making sure that everything's recorded properly, and the retention policies are dealt with, obviously, for that as well. So the publicity area was about engaging with the public and making sure that they would respond to the census, because the census is only as good as the response from the public, and you need that high response in order for the census to be successful. So we tendered for this again, and we had contractors working with us to build this campaign, and we alighted on Be Counted, and hopefully some of you saw this over the period. It's not new to you, and we wanted people to be able to see themselves in those pictures, to be as diverse as possible, and say the census is for you. And our message was Be Counted, because we need you in order to get this information and get this data, so that we can plan for all the things we need. You know, we all know, housing, healthcare, transport, schools is all based on census data. But every business in the country is using census data to decide where to locate their business. And, we've been told there's myriad of other uses to. And every so often someone else comes and tells us, oh, we use census data for this or for that or for the other. So, it's a hugely valuable data set to move on. So we had to really work to make it as inclusive as possible. And we went across TV, radio, print, digital, social, outdoor, both paid and, making sure we were going on to do interviews and segments on TV. We tried to do it in as many languages as possible, top 10 languages in the country. We had radio ads in, obviously English and Irish for everything. And then we liaised with every organisation we could think of, all the embassies, as you see, Pavy Point, carers, etc., just to get the message out there and get people engaged. And obviously the pester power of kids, we had some census lessons in schools, lesson plans, and promoted them out in the schools, and obviously posters and leaflets wherever we could think of. And of course, for the first time this time, we had the time capsule, which was a great way to engage with the public and caught the imagination, not only here, but internationally. We had calls from the New York Times and everything to hear out about this time capsule. So, this was the only voluntary part of the form, but it engaged the people saying, well, the form will be put away for 100 years, and what message do you want to leave for 100 years' time, which I think resonated with everyone. And I think the biggest one that was being shared on social media was, will Mayo have won the All-Ireland by then? So our call centre as well, just starting to go into some of the data and some numbers and things. We had 38,000 queries from the public. We had both an internal and an external help desk call centre, and there's the sort of breakdown. We were getting online calls, phones, and emails, and they generated 23,000 actions. And as I was saying to you, those actions then were logged on our field management system and then pushed out through the case management system to the numerator. If somebody rang up and said, I need an Irish form, or I didn't get my form yet, we could push all that information out through the system and keep track of it through that. So we have huge volumes of statistics and data that has come in from those systems, and actually we're still just trawling through them, trying to find out what is. And I think this is one of the things when you're getting all this data, having not had it, is what's important, because you can be inundated and swamped with the amount of data coming at you at a particular point in time. So of the 5,100 enumerators, it was a part-time contract, roughly 22 hours a week. We can see that on any one day in the census, 3,500 were working, and they were recording things from early morning till late at night. The busiest period, 6 to 7. We'd always said the busiest times for delivering and collecting census forms was the weekend, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, but it turned out that Monday is the busiest day, and Easter Sunday was the lowest day on collection, of the smallest number of collections of forms. We had over 9 million transactions throughout the operation. The maximum was 500 transactions in a minute, and we have over 1.8 million forms collected, and they're still posting them back, and we've nearly 90,000 forms that were posted back this time. And again, using the data, you can then visualize some of the information that you need. So this is our delivery period, the 5 weeks up to census night. So the blue lines are all the submissions. So if somebody called to a house and tried to deliver a form but nobody was there, it still created a submission. And then the lower orange lines is where they actually delivered. And I think on the delivery side of it, Paddy's Day was the quietest day. So people did take that day off. And then similarly for those collections, the blue lines are the submissions, the grey lines are the actual collected forms. And then once all the forms were collected, the yellow lines are the finalisation and summarisation and closing out of the field operation. We also used our geography area built a real-time operation system, which brought all that information in from that geography spine, from the field information of who was working where, when, to be able to visualize that data as to what's happening in my area, how are my people doing compared to other areas, etc. And that was hugely helpful during the field operation. Changing day to day, being able to see what was going on. And as mentioned, a census, you've only one go. In the middle of the census, obviously, we had huge numbers of Ukrainians coming into the country, and we had to liaise with all the government departments to find out where they were and make sure they got census forms. We already had leaflets in Ukrainian, so we had to print some more of those. And then we liaised with the various departments to make sure that they got delivered to the right areas and people got explained what a census was and what they were required to do. So as I say, we're processing at the moment, and it'll take 6 months to process all those census forms, ending up with our final results in April next year. Now, we did publish the first preliminary results there on June 23rd, which is less than 12 weeks after census night, which is based on the enumerator summaries of the areas. So, I mean, and that's unusual. Most international countries don't do any provisional results. But the day before those results came out, I was called into my first project board for Census 2027. So there's no downtime and twiddling your thumbs between the two projects. So we got approval just as we were going into the field for Census 22 to start work on providing an online option for Census 2027. And we acquired an amount of funding towards that from the NORP, from the EU funding. So we are actually doing a proof of concept on a very small scale in September to trial a small questionnaire online and work on sending people an access code and making sure they can get online and that we can get the data back from what they do. And our other first milestone for Census 27 is the public consultation, which will take place this autumn. And we start procurement right now to make sure that we have our contractors on board in time to deliver the census in 27, because we'll be doing a pilot in 24, a dress rehearsal in 26 before we do the census in 27. So no stopping, straight on to the next one. So that's really where I'm at the moment. Obviously, we're doing, as part of that, it'll be lessons learned from 22 as the key starting point, and then what we need to change to make it an online. Well, it'll be a dual process for 27 because not everyone will be able to do it online. So it'll be a multi-mode. So it'll be online and paper, and how that will work out and what the different percentages will be, etc. So we're just starting that, so I'm sure at some stage in the future, it'll be a good one to come back to and go lessons learned on that and what we needed to do for that. But for today, that's all I have for you.
Thank you very much, Eileen. That has been an incredible feat in terms of the sheer volumes of data that you speak about, and I suppose also some unique aspects of project managing elements like the census itself. Particularly elements like not really having any wriggle room on your dates. I think stuff like this is makes it somewhat unique in the project management space. But and then also some of the incredible interactions you had with other bodies in the public sector space, whether that was on the procurement side, the pay through the NSSO, and then as you say yourself, throw in then the Ukrainian crisis into it at kind of lastminute.com, obviously. And we as project and program managers always love to hear the concept of lessons learned. So it looks like as if while it was a success in its own right, I'm sure there was some challenges and will feed into your 2027 gig. So Eileen, again, as I said, thank you very much. There's a few questions coming in, and I will also encourage people to continue with the questions, and we'll get around to having a discussion at 12:15. But thank you, Eileen. So I'm going to move on to the next our next poll now. We're going to just launch a second poll, and the poll this time is going to look at, and I will get the results of the first poll in a second to you. So we're looking at challenges in association with big data, and I'm sure Eileen has some experience in terms of those challenges. So we've given you kind of three options here as to whether the challenge is associated with identifying the right data in the first instance. And I know Eileen's a team went a significant journey in terms of trying to establish that right data, and we all, I think, got a bit of a kick from the time capsule element, which was kind of novel in that last census. So otherwise, is the challenge more in the security and data protection space? We've all seen changes in that area, particularly in the latter number of years, and that relates to either cyber or GDPR or general data protection. And then our third option was really in relation to the ease of data access. I don't know, Owen, is there results back from poll number 1 yet, or?
Yeah, there is. I can share all of them at the end, just when no polls are
We'll
running.
share at the end.
Yeah, if you'd like me to, I can read them out otherwise, but I can share at the end might be best then once they're
Share
all
at the end.
completed.
Yeah, no,
Perfect. No problem.
that's fine. Yeah, that's great. So that's the poll. So we're going to move on now to a presentation from our EY colleagues. As I mentioned, Ciarán and Tim are giving up their time today to speak about their experiences in the world of projects involving data, and in particular in the artificial intelligence space. So I look forward to hearing from our friends in EY in terms of their experiences and presenting some pointers to the future world, I guess, which we all will need to be aware of. So I'm going to hand it over now to Tim and Ciarán to their presentation.
Perfect, Kevin. Thanks so much. And just want to double check you can see my PowerPoint slide here, okay, can you?
Yeah, all good, yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, well, look, massive thank you, Kevin, and the Project Management Network for giving us the opportunity to speak today. If I had known the attendance was going to be this high, I think I would have painted my walls in the background last night rather than working on the slides. So, but it's fantastic to see such a large audience. So, testament, Kevin, to you and the team, for continuing this. But Tim and I are going to give an overview of project management in the age of artificial intelligence. Although AI, it is a term coined in 1956 at the Dartmouth conference, but it's really gained huge momentum over the last few years. For example, it was in 1966 that the first chatbot was actually ever invented. The program was actually used as a therapist and understood nothing of the conversation. Not too sure if we'd like to use it, but it did cleverly manipulate the user's input using natural language processing, come back with appropriate questions or comments. But now, according to Gartner, 50% of knowledge workers will use a virtual assistant on a daily basis by 2025, only 3 years away. That's up from 2% in 2019. So today we're going to be discussing how to manage projects implementing AI, data science, analytics, and then flipping the coin to how can AI assist project managers through managing these engagements. Hopefully some of this will resonate with you, perhaps inspire you to a particular aspect of this, or it might completely validate, no, artificial intelligence is not my cup of tea. So I might ask my lovely colleague Tim to give a 30-second life story, if that's okay, Tim.
Yeah, thanks a million, Ciarán. Hello, everyone. Great to see such good participation in this network. My name is Tim. I'm a senior manager in EY's intelligent automation practice and have a background as an engineer and developer in the AI space. And have been working for years on AI-based projects in Denmark for the public sector in Denmark. And since my relocation to Ireland in 2019, I've been working mostly with the public sector in Ireland on robotics and AI-based projects as well.
You could probably notice it was nice of Tim to coordinate the avatar's dress code if you want to notice his tie there that he's wearing. But Kevin gave, I think, probably a bit of an introduction there to both of our backgrounds. Previously I also worked in IBM where I led data science and AI engagements globally until COVID has brought me back to lovely Ireland, where I'm excited to be working particularly with Irish clients on their journey to AI. But before we jump into it, it's important to consider what we've learned living through the past few major technological innovations. The internet brought the world's information and taught us that whatever we want, whenever we want it, it's always a finger length away. And then mobile tech enabled humanity to take that information with us at all times. Social computing and messaging changed the foundations of how we actually communicate with each other, and even the language itself. We're all getting caught up with GIFs and emojis. And each innovation provided a new context for communication and expanded, or could have changed, our understanding of the relationships we have with machines. And artificial intelligence requires us to take notice of these new contexts yet again. And it is an exciting time in Ireland. Last year, the National AI Strategy, AI Here for Good, was announced. Absolutely love the tagline. I thought it was very clever. The European Commission is proposing the first ever legal framework on AI, which addresses the risks of artificial intelligence and positions Europe to play a leading role globally. The expert group on future skills need for Ireland published a report only last week on the skills needed for Ireland to fully benefit from the opportunities presented by AI. And this is good timing, as the EY Ireland Tech Horizons 2022 survey, which is free to download if anyone wants, I can send a link, finds that 70% of the respondents of this survey say they're actually focusing on reskilling rather than hiring to acquire these technology-related skills. Combine this with 14,000 open roles in the data profession in Ireland, and you can kind of see where the market's going. Add a sprinkle of COVID, this pandemic has forced organizations to accelerate their cloud migration, to drive agility, and respond to unprecedented levels of change in the ways of working and customer behavior. And that is another reason why we see these areas as top investment over the next 2 years for Irish companies. As a part of this report, cloud, IoT, AI, ML, and data analytics are the top areas for investment. But it's important probably to demystify what is it. It is being used as a large buzzword across multiple organizations that we interact with, and I've seen in presentations too. So in computer science, the term artificial intelligence does refer to any human-like intelligence exhibited by a computer, robot, or other machine. And then in popular usage, artificial intelligence refers to the ability of a computer or machine to mimic the capabilities of the human mind. So learning from examples and experience, recognizing objects, understanding and responding to language, making decisions, solving problems, and combining these and other capabilities to perform functions a human might perform, such as greeting a hotel guest or driving a car. So in theory, human intelligence is the ability to perceive or deduce information, retain it as knowledge, and apply it to make decisions. Artificial intelligence simply puts these abilities in machines. However, in practice, AI is a broad set of technologies that solve real problems now, including computer vision, natural language processing, speech recognition, and machine learning. And it's these technologies can be combined to create new capabilities. But after decades of being relegated to science fiction, today AI is very much a part of our lives. And we always get asked the question, why now? As I mentioned earlier, 1956 was when it was first coined. And the surge in this development is made possible by the sudden availability of large amounts of data and the corresponding development and wide availability of computer systems that can process all the data faster and more accurately than humans can. So AI is completing our words as we type them, providing driving directions as we speak, vacuuming our floors. We've all seen a video of a cat on these robotic hoovers, and recommending what we should buy or even binge watch, with any Netflix people, attending. But it is driving applications such as medical image analysis that is really helping skilled professionals do important work faster and with greater success. So think of AI as the entire universe of computing technology that exhibits anything resembling human intelligence. But how does that help a project manager? Okay.
And that's exactly a good question, right? Because I'm sure that loads of people will then sit with that question of, well, what does that mean to me as a project manager or program manager? Surely AI doesn't really have an effect on how we do that particular job. And some of you might have come across the name Tom Davenport if some of you like reading about AI. And I think he made an interesting quote, which is really that we are as humans not very good in project management to estimate costs and timelines. And the particular reason that quote is very interesting is it tells us something about how do we apply new powerful tools that we're given. So what Ciarán was explaining is essentially that AI mimics some of that human intelligence. So we can actually go in and say, well, where is it as humans we are lacking capability or that's really difficult? And go in and apply the AI to that to hopefully do a better job. So the obvious question is, in project management, can we actually get the AI to just do this job that we find really difficult, which is to make very precise estimates of costs and timelines? And that is exactly committing what we call the AI fallacy, because what we've gone in and asked ourselves is, how can the computer do our job? But we've never asked ourselves, are we doing this job because that's all we can comprehend with our mind? And the computer doesn't necessarily have the same limitations as us. So the next slide. What's really interesting is that when we are doing projects, we always think of it as a process. The reason for that is we need, with a human mind, to put some sort of order on things. Because as long as we follow the process, we will achieve the result. And while that's true, it doesn't mean that we'll achieve the result in the most efficient manner, because a process always slightly changes with external factors and environmental factors for a project. And that's where AI can go in and cause a major paradigm shift in how we actually think of projects, and moving us away from thinking of here's a fixed process for how we get to the end of a project, to having an AI that generates the best actions. And instead of having a process-led project, we suddenly have a data-led project where we don't necessarily know how to get to the output because we don't know the future state of the environment we're working in. But the AI will lead us there. It's on the knowledge it can derive from that data. So that's not like a very big shift, and that's not a shift that happens overnight. So on the next slide, I'll show some examples of how we're already seeing some traces of that happening within project management. And one of them is tools for automation that are AI based. If you think of some of the jobs that we have to do as project managers, there are starting to be tools that can help us alleviate some of those more tedious tasks. So if you think of something as simple as having meetings with our project teams and with external stakeholders, rather than us trying to generate notes, generate actions, assigning owners to those actions and reminding them, which is a big and time-consuming job for us as project managers. What we can do is actually have an AI-based solution that listens in on our meeting, covers everything that gets said in the transcription of that meeting. We can then use natural language processing to take those transcriptions and turn them into more succinct notes. What we can also do is use natural language processing to actually figure out where in those notes were there actually actions and who has been told to perform those actions, so that we can also automate the reminders to people of making sure that those tasks are done to the deadline. So already there we can remove a lot of tedious work and time-consuming work from project management just by having discrete AI-based solutions introduced. The next step from there is then going in and saying, okay, well, one of the things that's really difficult in project management is then figuring out where do risks happen, based on all sorts of, it could be our resource usage, it could be on our budget burn down, it could be on external environmental factors. When is it that something starts to seem as if it could go off track? And that's where we can use machine learning based project management, which is already done today. I think there's really good Irish example of a company called Smart PMO, for example, that does this in the construction industry, of saying, well, there's loads of data within our project, and if we can give thousands of examples to a computer on projects that have gone very well and projects that haven't gone well, it will be able to look at our project and say, well, with the data and the situation of our project currently, here are flags that we can raise. And that's then exactly what's fueling that paradigm shift into the data-driven management, which is the next point here, where now we've sort of said, okay, we can use machine learning to generate those next best actions to come and flag all of the risks and issues that might come down the line. And that certainly helps us to detach ourselves from the process and let the AI figure out what is currently the best and most cost-efficient, quickest way to reach our end result without adhering to that process. So that, of course, almost sounds like let's, as project managers, lean back, cross our arms, and then let the robots take over, and the AI will come in and do all of that work for us. And that's the point that I've tried to make on the next slide here, which is that is most likely not what happens with the introduction of AI, which we've seen in many different areas. I think a really good example is an old one of the sewing machine being invented. When that happened, there were loads of people sewing clothes that thought that they would definitely be made redundant because the sewing machine would be much faster than they were doing the sewing by hand. And it actually ended up creating so much of the work that they ended up burning down factories in protest that they would most likely be made redundant. Counter happened was that those sewing machines were making the companies much more efficient. They could suddenly mass produce clothes at a very low cost, increasing demand in the market, and actually suddenly increase the demand for labor as well within that industry. And we're seeing exactly the same with modern examples. For example, look at the likes of Amazon. Loads of academic papers have been written based on their data, which shows that there's a direct correlation from when they were founded between how many robots they're adding into the business and how many people they need to hire, because using AI is what enables them to be so efficient that they can scale their business and add more people. So I think that's it's an important point to not see the AI as the risk to our job, but see it as a serious enabler for us as humans to deliver much better quality in much quicker time. So the other side of that coin is then, well, we can use the technology for the better, but most likely, most people in the future who work in the realm of project management will also be managing projects where there will be a degree of developing AI solutions and machine learning based solutions, which Ciarán will then take you a bit through as well.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Tim. And Kevin, apologies if there's any audio issues during there. Please shoot up any red flares now, and we'll try and wrap this up now. Just having a look at the time. But look, where we are in terms of, as a part of our survey, with Irish respondents, we found that 64% of Irish businesses are either making good progress on transformation objectives or making incremental changes as a first step towards a broader transformation. However, only 14% of Irish respondents say their organizations are actually data-centric. In other words, only 14% are leveraging data to be predictive, drive innovation, and continually improve every aspect of the business. And data transformations fail because the traditional approach to handling them is inherently flawed. So when data and analytics initiatives are treated like one-off technology implementation projects instead of business-critical initiatives, they are doomed to fail before they've even begun. I have the scars to show it as well. I've met a lot of salespeople, like our friend pitching to Homer Simpson here on the product solutions surrounding artificial intelligence. And as project managers, please interrogate them. But I like to use the analogy of treating, when you're approaching a project with data science, insights, or AI, kind of like a cave rescue mission. A project manager will want to plan the cave rescue mission in advance, know every detail and the steps required to achieve, the safety of the rescue. But it's not that simple. We don't know what's really in the cave. We can have assumptions, but we need to plan milestones and leave a degree of freedom for unexpected challenges. Will there be water, enough data? Will we need dynamite? Do we need to create data feeds? Will we need ladders? Is there enough feature engineering required to answer this problem statement? And in my career, I've never been on a project that has struggled due to a technical capability. You'll always find a resource for that. They fail when we don't provide tangible business value to the organization and when end users refuse to adopt the new technology. So when we're designing for artificial intelligence, our core intents are always rendered through the following lenses: the purpose, the reason for the user to engage with that system. This will involve as the user and system grow with each other. And we've seen practices like design thinking, bringing the user into the very center and keeping that philosophy of humans in the loop. The second one is value. These augmented capabilities provided by the system, it needs to tangibly improve a user's life, whether that is, as Tim gave examples of assisting a project manager, or if it's for the end user who's going to take that insight with them to provide better decision making. And the third one, which is most important, is trust. The willingness of a user to invest in an emotional bond with the system. And this trust is predicated on the security of the system's data, the feeling of a human control, and the quality of results that the system provides. And most of us will be familiar with the standard systems development lifecycle, along with how different methodologies and technologies are shaping it. But it's important to note that AI development will bring a new set of challenges to the field. And despite all of these different ways in which AI is being applied to today's organizational needs, the goals of these efforts are the same. But organizations are struggling, to make these systems work. by using data processes, methodologies, and approaches that are more application development centric, and they aren't rooted in the data centric nature of AI. And that's because the drivers, what drives AI and ML projects is it's not programmatic code, but it's rather data from which learning must be derived. Therefore, what is needed is a project management methodology that takes into account the various data-centric needs of AI, while also keeping in mind the application-focused uses of the model and other artifacts produced during that life cycle, keeping that human-centric view. Kevin, I'll just finish on this last. I won't go through the each failure one by one, but I'll give some chance for questions perhaps. But look, despite decades of experience running major technology projects and with billions of dollars invested in advanced technology, organizations are still struggling, to get success out of project delivery for AI. And according to many estimates, up to 80% of projects fail due to a very wide range of reasons, which I won't go through too much time right now, but I'll fly through that. You can kind of see these ones here. And if anyone's got any particular question, more than happy to go back and discuss it. But as you can see, it's always a tricky one to cover this in 20, 25 minutes. It's an emerging domain. There's a lot. Ireland is at an inflection point here with it. But hopefully we've given you a bit of a flavor for more investigation. And again, we're very happy to discuss more. We've attached our contact information. Both of us are extremely passionate about this topic, so our virtual door is always open. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Ciarán. That's great. Actually, Ciarán, would you mind just keeping up that last slide there? Just people may want to contact you, and thank you for sharing it. I think it was your name with the dot in between and an IE.EY.
There we go.
Yeah, apologies, guys. No problem.
Yeah. Apologies. Yes. Okay. So Tim and Ciarán, they've kindly put up their contact details there. So it's tim.morthorst at ie.ey.com, and Ciarán is Ciarán.Hickey at ie.ey.com. So we have a few questions coming in on our questions and answers slot. I might get a time to go through them all. So I might just first of all thank you, Ciarán and Tim, for that presentation. There's some good insights there in terms of that kind of migration from a process centric to more focus on the data. Something I need to write a note to Kevin on as well, and in particular trying to get that numbers up from the 14% data centric. I guess there's room for improvement there as well. So just a couple of questions that have come in the chat room. Some of them aren't, I suppose, specifically project management type of questions, but we might just have a look at them anyway. So a couple of questions have come in, particularly in relation to, say, maybe Eileen's piece. One of them relates to the drivers for moving towards the online piece in 2027, and a kind of a query, I guess, as to why there was no online option in previous census. And maybe Eileen, you might just kind of touch on that one, if you don't mind, just in terms of what were the lessons learned from previous censuses and how you've kind of made sure that you're utilizing sort of all the technology tools that are available to you now in terms of that kind of future census piece.
Yeah, so it is a moving space, and the census at the 2021, 2031 are part of EU requirements, whereas our one nationally then in the mid-decade is just a national one. So there's lots of regulations on that, and there's lots of discussions going on at the moment on the future of census. So a lot of areas did go online for that 2021 round. We did initially talk to Deeper about possibly doing it, but in the timelines it wasn't felt that it was feasible for the 2021 census. But the talk now is heading towards maybe an administrative census model, because a lot of the EU countries in particular have register-based information, and they're trying to generate census from that. So we are in discussions on that, and I think it was a feature of this census. It will be a feature of 27. And the big discussions at the international forum at the moment is whether a 2030-31 census will be administrative-led with a sort of sample survey, or whether it will still be the traditional field-led operation that we do now, with some administrative data for non-response or for additional information. If you're in a country that has lots of registers, you're probably going to go more that way. Here in Ireland, we get in the CSO lots of administrative data sets, which we are collating and creating new value from, and we have a data stewardship role across the public service to help departments if they are doing new IT and different infrastructure and stuff, to make sure the data side of that is up to scratch. But we don't feel that our admin data would give us the breadth of census information. We could get some population information maybe, and geography, but the breadth of variables that you get in a census at the moment we wouldn't have from any other source. But those conversations are being had and will evolve as the decade evolves.
Very good. And I suppose just generally for all panelists, I might just start with Tim and Ciarán on this one. In relation to sort of the AI, the use of AI, and kind of focusing on data and that, are there sort of specific skills and competencies that you would consider necessary in terms of the role of the project manager to assist in that respects, to try and kind of generate more focus on the data and reliance on some of the data that may be available or potentially could be available?
Yeah, I'm happy to go in first, Tim, on this one in particular. So Kevin, for me, like just through experience, it's more of a culture aspect. When we create these solutions, we're either improving a current process, or maybe it could be triggering a brand new one. And usually that's never scoped into any project plan. Most project managers will write it up to the point that a new column is created in the database, but never focus enough attention on the what change is this going to bring, and is the user ready for the change? Because we do have to remember that we're creating an insight that's going to support or underpin a decision within the organization. And if they're not embedding that into either the existing process or really to find a new one, well, it's going to just sit on a shelf, being correct. So for me, the project manager is, around the communication and making sure that the organization is ready for this, and that's probably more for the value adoption piece. The going toward managing the teams that might be more in the development aspect of it is keeping them close to reality. And, the type of, people that you would commonly find will really want to go down into the weeds and they'll find something else interesting in the data and explore that, and just move away from kind of the strategic agenda. And even when I mentioned there is a degree of freedom with data science and AI, but some problems people could spend years on, and it's important to find the balance as a project manager to developing something that's useful for people to make decisions, but also giving that little bit of freedom for people to fail and test out different methods or models to get the best outcome.
Very good. And in Eileen's case, then, Eileen, are there specific kind of skills would you regard then, skills and competencies necessary for projects involving such large quantities of data? Is there any sort of specific skills and competencies that you think might be necessary to complement the role of a project manager involved in such big data type projects?
I suppose in the CSO, that's part of everything we do because we are a statistical office. That's our bread and butter. And I suppose a lot of the areas that aren't statisticians and in that area kind of feel like second-class citizens in the office a bit sometimes because I think we don't have that, expert knowledge in that side. But I think because we are that way inclined, the CSO has a really is really up and center about data management and governance of data and data security, and that's core to everything we do. So I think everybody gets that breadth of knowledge on that, as well as their particular area and the general project management area. So I think it is useful to have that expertise, to even at a, if you're not fully expert, that you have a certain amount of it, and then that you have that support of the key areas that have the expert knowledge in those areas that you can go to for that further advice.
Very good. So that Tim doesn't feel left out now in terms of the questions, there's a specific one came in there for you, Tim. It was, where you spoke about that paradigm shift from process-led to the data-led projects. A question comes in from our participants, of which the numbers have been very significant this morning. So we were up to close to 140 people on the particular call, which is great to see. But the question is, in relation to that shift to data-led projects, does this envisage the development of all processes for future projects being developed by AI coding for all scenarios and all outcomes? So it's a sort of really embedding AI right across the board, or is there room for other elements, Tim?
And there always will be, right? I think there's a lot of doomsday prophecies out there in terms of AI coming to take over everything that we do, and what we are essentially seeing is that it's doing exactly the opposite. So it's more emphasizing where is it the human makes sense in this process, because especially when we're talking about data, there's a lot of smaller jobs that can become very tedious in terms of whether it's cleaning data, whether it is actually interacting, whether it's following up on tasks, for example, as I mentioned, or taking notes from a meeting. It's those sort of jobs that AI will help us get rid of so that we can focus on the things that are really important, as for example, stakeholder management, and make sure that people on our teams are happy and in turn become efficient, so that what gets suggested by the AI and what gets delivered by the AI to us, we can create good results with. So I'd say yes, definitely. I don't think that there's going to be any AI totally removing any sort of job.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. So I had envisaged launching a third poll, but I'm possibly out of time here. Might just kick it off, Owen, if that's okay. We were trying to get a sense as to the future direction of our conferences, and given the success of the webinar format, as I said, we're up to issue number 11 at this stage. But we also see the country opening up, and I'm sure a lot of people would like to engage in an in-person setup. So we're just looking for future preferences. Our next event is hopefully going to be an in-person conference on the 6th of December with an agenda to be arranged. And I have to note some of the questions that have come in the chat box here today that we haven't got around to will actually form some input into some future workshops and that. So the question really is the preference for future conferences, whether we're talking in terms of a continuation of this kind of WebEx type of online webinar format, an in-person conference like the one we're planned for in December, where hopefully we can chat over coffees and danishes and so on in Dublin Castle, or a hybrid, and a hybrid to kind of suit kind of both models. So that's the third poll. Leave that one open for a minute or two. Owen, would you mind sharing sort of the results of the earlier two, maybe just if that was possible?
Yeah, I could do it. I just have to close the last poll first. So just give another couple of seconds, folks, if you want to get some answers in, and then I'll be able to share the first two. So we have some good results anyway from the one that I just opened. So I'm just going to tentatively close that, and then from the first one. Now, not sure if you can see the results. I can read
So
them out.
yeah,
If not, you
so
can see them. Perfect.
so we have projects in our organization involving significant large levels of data. So the answers really are in the yes state. Seems to be a significant enough majority, if I'm reading this right, whereby the 123 that were on the call at the time
Yep.
answered positively on that one. So that's interesting. We have a bit to catch up with in the defence organisation, I think, anyway, on this one. So the second poll then, Owen.
Let's see what we have, and let me know if you can see it there.
Yeah, that's good. So
Great.
we asked people to consider the biggest challenges with regard to big data, and it was the identification of the right data, which is just kind of marginally ahead. Security and data protection was a key issue for a number of respondents, and data access somewhat kind of lesser down in terms of priorities. So the getting that kind of right data, and in Eileen's example, it was clear that she identified and trawled the various stakeholder groups to identify that in the first instance, so that it would inform future policy and that. So that's good stuff. The last one then, Owen, isn't in yet, is it?
No, well, here we go. So we'll have preliminary results from that. So there you go.
So surprisingly enough, the in-person conference is not as popular as I thought it might be. So that gives us a little bit of food for thought. Hybrid obviously is kind of marginally ahead on that one, and the no answer. So listen, guys, I've kind of gone slightly over budget in terms of time. I know that's not something that from Eileen's presentation that she in CSSO land would be happy with in terms of missing my landing spot in terms of the time. So I'd like to thank again our key presenters today. So Eileen, Tim, and Ciarán. Really sincere appreciation for your presentations and your answers to the various questions that came in afterwards. As I said, we're hoping to have a physical conference in Dublin Castle on December the 6th. It might be hybrid now based on what's sort of the straw poll today. A recording of this event will be put on the website in the next few days. We just have to review it. Apologies for the audio at times. It did tend to break up a little bit, so we just need to do a bit of examination as to what that went, how that went. Could be just on my end. I'd like to thank the Project Management Network Group, a subgroup, for organising the conference today and providing sort of the necessary feeds into this. There are spaces on that subgroup for anybody who's keen on continuing the embedding of project management and program management across the public service. I'd like to also thank the backup team in Department of Public Expenditure and Reform and my own gang in Defence Land for their work in organising this conference. So with that in mind, I'd just like to thank you again. Have a good day. Thank you all.